Hey guys, and welcome back to State of the Nation. I'm Andrew, and let's talk about this new poll that NewsHub has published yesterday. And the headline is, Jacinda Ardern goes stratospheric, Simon Bridges is annihilated. And, well, it's not good for National, let's just say that. So essentially what has happened is this new poll has come out and it is showing the massive groundswell of support for our Prime Minister. So it's not so much the Labour Party, it is support for Jacinda Ardern. So what's happened is 56% would be the election result if it was based on these poll results, and we can see that scrolling up there, 56.5% up a massive 14%, and National at 30.6% down almost 13%. So a pretty terrible showing and a pretty outstanding showing for Labour support. So what is all this based on? Well, this is based on Jacinda Ardern's absolutely massive popularity. So this is where we start to talk about the divergence of popularity and leadership. And the two are getting confused quite a lot. So Jacinda is very popular. She puts on a smile. She gets in front of the camera a lot. She poses for a lot of photo opportunities. And she smiles and she hugs. And so people go, wow, she's nice. And, well, so far we haven't had too much fallout from the pandemic because we're still printing money. We've got $50-60 billion worth of government bonds coming. Some of it's already here. We've got big international loans. We've got money being thrown around left, right and centre. And don't mistake that for something unique to Labour. National would have still had to do the same sort of stuff. And it's going on everywhere in the world as well, especially in the United States, where they are printing money very quickly. So Jacinda's very popular. She is seen to be doing a good job, which is not the same thing as actually doing a good job, because this is going to kind of come crashing down around us. But for the time being, it is super popular to support the Prime Minister. And in fact, if you try and post online that you don't support the Prime Minister, there will be all sorts of people jumping up and down and making a big fuss. And there's a lot of sort of social psychology that goes in there. Once people start to feel that it is socially expected that you like the Prime Minister, then you're going to start being socially excluded if you're not in that group of people that like the Prime Minister. And, well, it's the bandwagon effect, basically, is what we've got going on here. So as something becomes more popular, that popularity leads to it increasing in popularity. And so because it's popular to like Jacinda, then it becomes more popular to like Jacinda. And any criticism is met with some pretty, stiff resistance. And, people do not appreciate it if you are not a fan of the Prime Minister. And so this is all leading into an absolute massive swell of support for the cult of Jacinda, and it's all about her personality and her marketing, and none of it is actually based on the leadership of the Labour Party, because they're not actually leading us through these times. They're kind of setting a bit of policy and hoping for the best, and we saw that in the budget. There was actually a very good session this morning from the Epidemic Response Committee where they talked about, that's these guys here that got formed, Simon Bridges is actually the chair of that, and they were talking about, they talked to a lot of business leaders and got some feedback on what the handling is so far, what the sort of interpretation of the government's response to all of this has been and how it's affecting businesses. And the overwhelming opinion was that the budget is not very well targeted, the money is not being cleverly spent, it is just being thrown around, and there are some big gaps and delays that are really hurting businesses right now, and it's really only the stimulus money that's sort of keeping a lot of people afloat, and people really have to make the decisions whether they stay in business or try and pivot away and do something else at this point. So there is a reasonable amount of criticism that the government is trying to essentially centralise the spending, control it as big projects, and really manage every aspect of the financial recovery rather than stepping out of the way and letting business do what business does, figure out what the new market is going to be and get on with it. So there was a lot of feedback around that. Unfortunately, that's not really going to be listened to. There was a couple of Labour MPs which seemed maybe slightly interested, but for the most part seemed fairly oblivious to what the real issues are. So we are going to see big problems once the wage subsidy runs out, and businesses have really had no support. There's been, like I said, benefits administered through companies in the form of a wage subsidy, but really no support for businesses themselves after the government shut them all down for 2 months. A lot of businesses could have continued trading just online, just with safety precautions, and you would still have some revenue, but what happened was that everything got completely shut down unless you had a piece of paper from the government saying you were allowed to trade, it's kind of the reverse of what it should have been. But what's done is done, and we have to figure out how to move forward from here. So unfortunately, all this advice around the government releasing restrictions, things like the RMA was talked about, how the government itself is releasing its own obligations to follow the RMA but still making other people follow it. So it recognises that it is really in the way of progress and getting us out of this hole, but they're not prepared to lift that for anybody other than themselves and their chosen projects. So there's still quite a lot of cronyism going on. It's just not the bankers doing the cronyism, it's the government. So unfortunately, we are going to continue to see sort of a plan to centralise and lead us out of this situation. Well, that's going to be the plan, instead of actually just stepping out of the way, making sure the infrastructure and the taxation and everything is the right way for us to move forward. They're not going to do any of that stuff. They're just going to stand in our way. They're going to try and run the whole country like they did with KiwiBuild. So yes, there is going to be some big problems coming from that, but it was a really interesting session of the Epidemic Response Committee. Unfortunately, the advice won't be heeded, I don't think, and we won't get anywhere out of it. So where are we at? Well, we've got a super popular Labour Prime Minister. In fact, bordering on, and some people are saying surpassing the popularity of John Key back in his heyday. The difference here, though, is that when John Key was leading us through a financial crisis, he had a good understanding of business and money and knew how to do that. There's still a lot of criticism to be levelled at some of the things that were done, but in general terms, he knew at least how everything worked in order to try and facilitate recovery. And New Zealand actually did really well through the GFC. A lot of countries did a lot worse than us. So it made quite a big difference having someone at the helm that really was able to sort of know what was going on. The difference we have now is that the current Labour government don't really have a good handle on economics and how business works. We've seen things like Deborah Russell getting saying some very offensive things towards business owners, that kind of stuff. So it is going to be difficult for them to lead us out of this like they want to, because, well, they don't actually know what they're doing. And the budget reflects that. It's just a whole lot of spend and pray, which is, well, it's a lot of our money to be spending in the hope that it's going to work, because it just doesn't look likely. And that is the general consensus from people who know how businesses are suffering and how the economy actually works. Alright, so that is where we are today. Let's hope for some better news tomorrow. Hopefully we can have some good stuff on this channel rather than being a constant complaint. But at the moment, unfortunately, it is pretty much a constant complaint about how the government is running things, because they are making a hash of it. But it is a delayed response that we'll see it all come crashing down. So hopefully we'll have some good stuff to talk about. soon. All right. I'll see you guys in the next one.